There's a fear I think we talk around all the time without actually naming it. It's not simply the fear of failing, it's the fear of being seen trying before we know whether we're going to succeed. It's the difference between quietly wanting the new job and telling someone that you applied, between planning the business in private and letting the first customer see the offer, between recording the video and actually posting it, between saying, I'm thinking about doing this and knowing that someone might ask you 6 months later how it went. Because once someone else knows, then there's an audience, right? And once there's an audience, there's this possibility of judgment. Okay? So today, I want to talk about why being seen trying can feel so exposing, particularly for Black women who've spent years being rewarded for looking capable, and what it costs us when we only allow ourselves to be visible once we have proof that something works. Okay, so welcome back to Blaque Noire. And if you're new here, welcome to Blaque Noire. I'm Tanya, and this is the space where we have honest conversations about anything and everything, who we are now, what we want next, and the things Black women are often carrying underneath the version of ourselves that everyone else sees. And we do this in an open, honest, and most importantly, unfiltered way. Right, first of all, I would like to say you'll probably notice that I'm in a different location today. I'm not sat in my kitchen talking to you as normal, but I am actually on holiday in Italy. So I am here, no makeup on, my sunglasses on, which, considering what we're talking about today, feels kind of strangely appropriate. Okay, because part of this journey for me has been learning that I don't have to wait until everything looks perfect before I allow myself to be seen. Okay, so this week I want to explore why Black women are so afraid to be seen trying. And what I would like to say is that I am recording this outside, so I apologize if some of the sound isn't quite the normal quality that you'd be expecting, and if you might hear some cars driving behind me. Okay, so back to it. Why Black women are so afraid to be seen trying. Now, one of the things I want to do is I want to be careful with this question from the very beginning, because obviously I'm not saying every Black woman is afraid of visibility, or even that we all have the same experience, because, we don't, right? What I'm interested in is a pattern a lot of women can recognize, right? Being comfortable doing the work, but much less comfortable actually being watched while the work is still unfinished. So this isn't a conversation about becoming loud, exposing every plan, or turning your private life into public content. Okay, it's about the point where privacy stops being a boundary and starts becoming a condition. You know, I can try, but only if no one sees me until I'm good at it, and that's something that I can definitely relate to, especially whilst, I've been building this Blaque Noire. So let me start with something simple. Trying something privately and trying something visibly are psychologically, sorry, two very different experiences. When it's private, the first attempt can be terrible and no one knows, okay? You can change your mind without explaining it. You can decide the idea wasn't right. You can practice until the gap between what you imagined and what you can actually do gets so much smaller. The moment another person knows, the process suddenly feels social, okay? We imagine their questions. We imagine them noticing the slow progress. We imagine them thinking we're delusional for even trying, right? And sometimes we imagine people enjoying the fact that it actually didn't even work. And I think that's why so many things are so easy to want privately, but hard to claim them publicly. Now, most of the time, the desire itself isn't always the frightening part, okay? Being perceived in the gap between the desire and the result is what's actually scary. Okay, think about how often we do this as grown up women. We apply for something, we don't tell anyone unless we get it, right? We start seeing or dating someone and say very little until we know it's serious. We decide, we want to change our career, but keep talking about it as a vague possibility, because saying I'm doing this creates a version of us that can now be judged against this outcome. Right. And we do it with health too, right? I mean, I've been guilty of this myself, right? We wait until we've lost the weight to talk about, getting stronger and getting healthier. We wait until our finances look better to say we're changing the way that we spend. We wait until the course is finished to say we went back to study. No, none of that is automatically a problem, because privacy is allowed, okay? But it becomes worth examining when the secrecy isn't actually giving the thing we want space to grow. It's giving us space to essentially just avoid embarrassment. Okay, for Black women, I think, as always, the conversation becomes so much more layered, okay? Because competence isn't just a personality trait for us. For a lot of us, competence has, social value, professional value, sometimes even protective value. Many Black women have been taught directly or indirectly that we need to be prepared, that we can't afford to be sloppy, that we need to know our stuff before we enter the room because our mistakes won't always be given the same level of grace as our counterparts. Some of us grew up with the language, of having to be twice as good, just to be seen as half as good. Some of us have learned the lesson later through workplaces where we were one of very few Black women there, or through situations where we felt hyper visible in all the ways that we just didn't want to be. When you've had that experience, looking competent can become part of how you create safety. You prepare, you anticipate, you make sure that no one can easily dismiss you. And to be clear, those skills can be incredibly useful. They may be a part, actually, of how you got where you are today. Now, the problem is what happens when that protection becomes almost like a prison. Okay, when you start believing you're only safe, credible, or respectable when you already know what you're doing, because every new chapter has a beginner stage, sorry. There's no clever way around that, right? You can be a brilliant account director and still be a beginner founder. You can be a confident leader and still be new to investing. You can be experienced in one relationship pattern and completely new to building a healthier one. You can be strong in the gym, but yet new to swimming. You can be somebody who, everyone asks for advice and still need help in a room that's unfamiliar to you. But if you've made it that your identity is heavily attached to being the capable one, being a beginner can feel like a loss of status. Okay, you can go from fluent to hesitant, from giving the answer to asking questions, from knowing the rules to having to watch someone else first. And that discomfort doesn't mean that the new thing is necessarily wrong for you. Sometimes it simply means that your ambition has taken you somewhere where your fluency or perfected ability just hasn't caught up with it yet. Now, this is where perfectionism, in my opinion, gets interesting. Because perfectionism doesn't always look like obsessing over tiny details. Sometimes it looks completely sensible. It looks like one more course, one more qualification, one more round of research, one more edit, one more month before you launch, one more redesign before you send that link, one more week before you actually post it. And of course, preparation is good, right? I'm not going to sit here and pretend, thoughtfulness is a character flaw, but there is a point where preparation stops improving the work and starts postponing exposure. A question that I typically find useful is the extra preparation mentally changing what I'm going to do, or is it mainly just delaying the moment that someone else gets to actually have an opinion? Because those are two very different things. The hardest part about this kind of perfectionism, right, is that the finish line is constantly moving. You tell yourself you'll apply when your CV is stronger. Then the CV is stronger, and you decide, oh, you need more leadership experience. You tell yourself you'll start creating, once the branding is right. Then the branding is right, and you decide that you need better equipment. You tell yourself that you'll launch when you have enough content. Then you have the content and decide you need a bigger audience first. Readiness, right, becomes something you can always place one step away, right? But the truth is, if you're not careful, you can spend years being privately capable of something. You never give your, sorry, if you're not careful, you can privately spend years, being privately capable of something. You never give yourself, the public, evidence to become good at it. So I actually want to spend a minute or two actually telling you about my experience with this. Now, some of you may know, some of you may not know, right? Blaque Noire hasn't just started, okay? I've gone through so many different versions of this under so many different names over the years, and I've kept these businesses private, okay? None of my friends, family knew that I was creating them, but each business would get to the exact same point every single time, and that point is where I had to put myself out there and become more visible. And each and every time the same thing happened, I would just stop literally dead and not continue. Okay, the thought of being seen and really putting my face out there would scare the life out of me. And if I'm being honest, it still does. So the fact that I'm sat here doing this right now is crazy, right? But I made the decision that if I want Blaque Noire to become what I know it can be, I quite frankly, I just need to suck it up and do it scared, right? I'm not gonna lie. Before I record any episode or reel, I am nervous and I am scared. But I have decided that I'm gonna stop playing small and just do it. Okay? I've only told one or two people that I really trust and I know won't judge me, right? Or put their own insecurities and fears and sometimes just their negativity on me, right? When I'm trying to build something. So here I am. I'm doing it scared. I'm sharing it with with all of you, even though it's definitely not perfect and it's definitely not where I see this being in, a year's time, 2 years' time. And my God, okay, does social media make this harder? Because we're consuming people's beginnings like retrospectively. Okay, somebody shows us the first office after their company is worth millions, the first video after they've got hundreds of thousands of followers, the rejection emails after their book has become a bestseller, the tiny audience after they've had a massive tour sellout. Once we know the ending, the beginning looks brave, sometimes it even looks cute, right? But living in your own beginning in real time feels nothing like watching somebody else's with the ending already attached, right? Your first post, has just 12 views. Your first offer has no customers yet. Your first application might genuinely be rejected. Your first attempt at the new skill may genuinely look bad. There's no inspirational soundtrack whilst you're inside it, okay? And that gap matters because we can and so often compare our unedited present, right, to somebody else's meaningful edited past, right? And then we decide we should wait until ours looks more convincing. You see this with content all the time. People post something, it gets a quiet response and they delete it. Not because the information was wrong, not because it no longer represents them, because the low number feels visible. And I understand that instinct. Trust me, I felt it so many times, okay? A number can feel like a judgment, but a quiet first result is still a result. It's information. It tells you what the platform has understood, what the audience responds to, what you might try differently next time, okay? If every imperfect data point becomes something we erase, we never build the tolerance for iteration and trying again. We only build the habit of disappearing. I also think this becomes especially relevant after the age of 35, right? Because the older we get, the more established we can look from the outside. By this stage, people may know you for, a particular career, a particular relationship status, a particular lifestyle. You may have responsibilities that make experimentation feel less casual. You may have enough life experience to know that choices have consequences, which is a good thing, right? But maturity can quietly turn into a belief that you should no longer be seen to be figuring things out, okay? As though uncertainty belongs to your 20s, right? And in your 40s, you should come with this complete manual, right? It doesn't, okay? There are women changing careers at 41. I've done that. Learning to date differently at 45. Starting businesses at 50. Going back to study, leaving places that no longer fit them, rebuilding their health, finding community, learning different technology, becoming visible in rooms that they just used to avoid. Experience doesn't remove the beginner stage. It changes what you bring into it. And this is why, I don't love that language when people say that, oh, you're starting from zero when women change direction, because you're never really starting at zero. You may be new to the role, but that brings judgment. You may be new to the business, but that brings you years of understanding people, budgets, deadlines, or customer behavior. You may be new to setting boundaries, but you bring every lesson that you learned from the years without them, okay? You're a beginner in the specific skill. You're not a beginner at being a whole adult, okay? And that matters because it lets us hold two truths at once. One being, I've earned confidence in what I know, and the second one being, and I'm allowed to be visible, learning what I don't know yet, okay? Now, I want to talk properly about privacy because I don't want the takeaway from this episode to be that everybody suddenly needs to announce everything, okay? Absolutely not, because you definitely don't need to do that, okay? Some goals, right, grow better away from commentary, okay? Some relationships do need to be protected. Some career moves should stay confidential. Some business ideas genuinely need development before they're made public. And for Black women in particular, we don't need another message telling us, we owe everybody access to our vulnerability. Privacy can be wise, discernment can be wise. The question is, though, whether the privacy is in service of the thing that we're doing or in service of avoiding a feeling. And if you're not sure, I would ask yourself just a couple of questions, okay? Would I still keep this private if I knew for certain that it would be successful? Has keeping it private helped me do better work, or has it mostly just helped me avoid accountability? Am I waiting for information that I genuinely need, or for a level of certainty that no one really gets? You know, is there at least one safe person or room or platform where this could actually exist outside of my head? Would I really judge another woman as harshly as I'm judging myself for being a beginner? Those questions don't tell you that, public is always better, right? They just help you make that boundary consciously instead of letting embarrassment make it for you. So, what do we actually do with this? Okay. I mean, I like the idea of what I'm personally calling a visibility ladder. Okay. The mistake is thinking that there are only two options: one, being completely private, or two, being completely public. But there are so many different steps or ladder runs in between. Okay, step one might be as simple as saying the goal out loud to yourself and writing the first deadline down. Step two might be telling one trusted person who's not going to kill the idea with their opinions. Step three might be showing an early draft to someone whose feedback is useful. Step four, might be making a low stakes public move. You just post the idea, you attend an event, ask a question, make an inquiry, send that application. Okay, and step five might be sustained visibility, allowing yourself in the same way that I am, okay, no matter how scared you are, to keep showing up day after day, week after week, whatever it may be, whilst your results are still inconsistent. The point isn't to leap from being completely private to like maximum exposure. The point is to stop making invisibility the only place that you are allowed to feel safe. And I want to emphasize the words selective and safe, okay? Visibility is not the same as access. You can let people know you're building something without giving them the right to shape it. You can be open without learning you can be open about learning without making yourself available to every single opinion. You can, share a first version and still delete disrespectful comments. Okay, you can ask for help, and still decide whose advice actually carries any weight with you. Part of becoming more visible isn't just tolerating judgment; it's becoming more discerning about which judgment deserves a vote. Okay. Now, let's be honest, whether we really want to admit it or not, there is a cost, okay, of waiting until you're impressive or complete, okay? People can't support what they don't know exists. Hiring managers can't see ambition when you never express it. Collaborators can't respond to ideas that you never share, right? A potential customer can't buy the offer that stays in your notes on your phone, okay? A community can't gather around a voice that only speaks once it's certain that everyone will absolutely agree with what they're saying. And there's an internal cost too, okay? Every time you survive an imperfect, visible attempt, you gather evidence that actually being seen is survivable. Okay, every time you adjust, approve, and return, improve and return, you prove that a first result doesn't define you. Confidence isn't only built on succeeding, a lot of confidence is built by discovering that you can remain intact when the result is ordinary. Your first attempt isn't proof of what you're capable of, it's information that you can use and you can learn from. Now, I know that all sounds obvious, okay? But I think we forget this fact when we're trying to do something that matters to us, especially if it matters to us a lot, okay? We make the first response mean way too much. One rejection becomes proof that we were unrealistic. One low performing post becomes proof we're not made for content, okay? One awkward date becomes proof that this new approach to dating just isn't working. One hard week at the gym becomes proof that we can't be consistent. But you can improve without something to learn from. You can't improve a version you refuse to release into the world in any form. The first version doesn't need to prove the future, okay? It only needs to give you enough information for the next one. So here's a challenge that I'm taking into the sisterhood this week, okay? I'm calling it the Scene Trying Challenge, okay? So I challenge you for the next 72 hours choose one thing that you would normally keep hidden until you looked more impressive, and take one safe, visible step. Send the application before you feel like the perfect candidate. Ask the question you would usually go home and Google in private. Show someone the draft. Post the useful thought without rewriting it 10 times. Make the inquiry. Book the class. Tell one supportive person what you're working towards. Not because public is morally better, but because, and not because you owe anybody your process, okay, but because we need experiences that teach our nervous systems that the beginner version of us can be seen and the world doesn't end. And if the visible step that feels safe for you is small, then let it be small. This isn't about proving anything to anyone. For some of you listening, the brave thing may genuinely be telling one friend. Okay, for someone else, it may be pressing publish. For another, it may be asking for a meeting. Don't borrow against someone else's level of exposure. Okay, choose the step that stretches you without violating your own boundaries. And that truly is enough. Okay. Right, if this week's conversation has made you realize that there's something you want to start, change, or explore, but you keep waiting until you feel completely ready, I do want to point you towards something that I've already created for you. Okay, it's called the Life Reinvention Planner, and it gives you space to look honestly at what still fits and what you may have outgrown and what it is that you actually want to do next. Then turn that reflection into low risk experiments and a practical 90-day plan. It's not about blowing your life up or forcing a dramatic decision. It's purely there to help you move from thinking about a change to testing what your next chapter could actually look like. And you can find the Life Reinvention Planner in the Blaque Noire shop on my website. I've put the link to it in the description below. And as always, I love to leave you guys with a question, right? So the question I want to leave you with today is, what is one thing you would try differently if no one's opinion of your first attempt matters? And, if you want to finish the sentence, make it this one. If I stopped waiting to look ready, I would, and then tell me what you would do. Okay, put your answer in the comments, if it feels right to share there. If you want a deeper written version going about today's conversation, the latest issue of the Blaque Noire edit is linked below. And if you want to continue the conversation, with other Black women just like you, as always, please, please, please come and join us in the Blaque Noire Sisterhood. It's our private Facebook group where we get real and we get deep, okay? Also, if this episode has possibly made you think of another woman who's quietly waiting until the first version of herself is impressive, then please, by all means, just forward this to her. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Blaque Noire if you want more conversations like this. And remember, uncertainty doesn't mean that you're not serious, okay? And being unpolished doesn't mean that you're not committed. You're allowed to look like you're still at the beginning. It's perfectly normal. Everybody has a beginning stage, okay? And if you're not already, don't forget to follow me over on Instagram, which is at black_noir. I'll link that in the description also. And as always, thank you so much for watching. It really, really does mean a lot to me, and it keeps giving me the confidence to keep putting these videos out there. So thank you very much, and I will see you next time.